Dr. Kyung-soo stood at the large window of the Kepler station, looking out at the endless darkness of space. Below him, the genetic research laboratory stretched across 3 entire floors. Thousands of machines hummed and beeped, processing samples that would change everything humanity knew about itself. He held a cup of cold coffee in his hand, forgotten hours ago. His eyes were tired but focused, watching the work continue through the night shift. The Kepler station orbited between Earth and the Velcaron homeworld, a neutral place built by both species to study what made them different. 3 years ago, when humans first met the Velcarons, everyone expected to find a species that was stronger, faster, and better designed for war. The Velcarons themselves certainly believed this. They were tall, muscular beings with compound eyes that could see multiple colors humans could not even imagine. They moved with perfect coordination and fought with brutal efficiency. Everything about them suggested genetic perfection for combat. So when the Velcaron High Council agreed to participate in a comparative genetic study, they did so with complete confidence. They wanted to understand exactly how far ahead they were of this young human species. It would be a test, a way to measure humanity's development and place in the galaxy. The Velcarons were not worried. They had nothing to fear from examining the genetic material of Earth's developing civilization. Dr. Kyung-soo had been chosen to lead the human research team because of his brilliant work in genetic mapping. His partner, Dr. Mi-sun, was equally skilled in analyzing complex biological data. Together, they had built a team of 15 scientists and technicians, each one carefully selected for their expertise. The project had taken months to plan. They needed to collect samples from both species, process them through the most advanced genetic sequencers in the known galaxy, and compare the results. But there was more to it than simple comparison. Kyung-soo wanted to understand not just what was different, but why those differences existed. Genes did not develop randomly. Every genetic trait was shaped by millions of years of evolution, by the environments each species faced, by the challenges they had to overcome to survive. A warrior species would carry markers of aggression, cooperation, pain tolerance, and strategic thinking. A developing species like humanity would show something different, something softer, something that reflected their struggle to build civilization in a world that had tried to destroy them at every turn. The samples had arrived 3 weeks ago. Velcarons provided genetic material from their elite military units, the warriors who had established their species' reputation across the galaxy. Humans provided samples from ordinary civilians, volunteers from Earth who understood the importance of the research. There was no deception in the process. Everyone knew what was happening. The first week of testing had been routine. The machines sorted through the genetic code, identifying markers and creating maps of each species' biological blueprint. Everything was proceeding as expected. The Velcarons showed the genetic markers of a trained warrior species. Humans showed the markers of a young, adaptable species still learning to survive in a complex universe. Then something unexpected appeared in the data. Jiho was the first to notice it. He was a young technician, only 24 years old, but his eyes were sharp and his mind was brilliant. He worked the night shift because he preferred the quiet laboratories and the chance to think deeply about the genetic sequences passing through his screens. On the 3rd week of the project, at 3 in the morning, Jiho called Dr. Kyung-soo. "You need to come see this," Jiho said over the communication system. His voice sounded strange, like he could not believe what he was looking at. Right now. Kyung-soo had been in his small sleeping quarters, resting for the first time in 2 days. He dressed quickly and made his way to the main laboratory. The corridors of Kepler Station were empty at this hour, only the soft hum of the station's life support systems keeping him company. When he arrived at the laboratory, he found Jiho staring intensely at his screen, his fingers hovering over the data as if he was afraid to touch it. "Show me," Kyung-soo said simply. Jiho pulled up the genetic mapping on the main display. "The aggression sequences," he said. "The markers that control combat drive, territorial behavior, the chemical reactions that push a being toward violence and conflict. Look at the comparison." Kyung-soo felt his breath catch in his chest. The data was clear and undeniable. The human samples showed 3 times the concentration of aggression markers compared to the Velcaran samples. 3 times. It was impossible. It made no sense. "Run it again," Kyung-soo said. "Check the samples. Make sure there was no contamination." By the time Dr. Mi-sun arrived at the laboratory 2 hours later, Jiho had already run the test 3 more times. The results were identical. The humans had triple the aggression sequences. Mi-sun looked at the data, then at Kyung-soo, then back at the data. Her face was pale. "This is wrong," she said softly. "This has to be wrong." But they both knew it was not wrong. The machines they were using were the most advanced in the world. The samples had been properly preserved. The methodology was perfect. The data was telling them something that seemed completely backwards from everything they understood about the universe. Humans were the young species, the ones still struggling to build their first interstellar civilization. Velcarans were the warriors, the ones who had dominated their region of space for thousands of years. How could humans possibly carry more aggression in their very genetics? "We need to think about this carefully," Mi-sun said, her scientific mind already working through the implications. "We cannot simply accept what the data is telling us without understanding what it means. These are aggression sequences, yes, but they do not determine everything about a species. There are other factors: culture, training, choice, environment." Kyung-soo nodded slowly. "We need to expand the analysis. Look at everything. Empathy markers, cooperation genes, emotional regulation pathways. We need to see the whole picture before we tell anyone about this." Over the next few days, they worked without sleep, expanding their research, diving deeper into the human and Velcaran genetic codes. They wanted to understand not just the aggression markers, but what else humans carried in their biology that might explain this shocking discovery. The laboratory became their entire world. The coffee grew cold in forgotten cups. The machines continued their constant humming, processing data, revealing secrets that nature had hidden for millions of years. And slowly, carefully, Dr. Kyung-soo and his team began to see something that neither humans nor Velcarans had ever considered before. The truth was far more complicated and far more interesting than anyone had expected. The data was everywhere. Holographic screens filled the laboratory, each one showing different aspects of the human and Velcaran genetic codes. Dr. Kyung-soo had not slept in 36 hours. His eyes burned, but he could not look away from what they had found. Dr. Mi-sun sat across from him, her hands shaking slightly as she input commands into her personal tablet. Neither of them had spoken in almost an hour. The initial finding had only been the beginning. Once they knew humans had triple the aggression sequences, they began to search for answers. Why? What could possibly explain this reversal of everything they thought they knew? They started looking at other genetic markers, other biological traits that might paint a complete picture. What they discovered was shocking. Humans did indeed carry extraordinary amounts of aggression sequences, but humans also carried equally high levels of empathy genes. The human genetic code showed incredible capacity for bonding with others, for forming deep emotional connections, for caring intensely about other individuals. These empathy markers were not weak or secondary. They were just as strong, just as prevalent as the aggression markers. More than that, humans carried genetic pathways for cooperation, for working together in groups, for forming communities and societies. The human species had evolved with the ability to be ferociously violent and deeply compassionate at the same time. They were walking contradictions written into their very biology. Velcarans, on the other hand, showed something different. Their aggression markers were lower, but their logical reasoning pathways were clearer and more efficient. They had evolved for discipline and control. Their empathy markers were present but more limited. They were not incapable of feeling for others, but their genetic predisposition did not push them toward the same kind of intense emotional bonding that humans experienced. "This is insane," Mi-sun said finally, breaking the long silence. "How did we not see this before?" "Because nobody was looking for it," Kyung-soo replied, his voice hoarse from not speaking. "Everyone assumed that a warrior species would have strong aggression genes. We were right, but we did not think to ask what other traits might accompany those genes in a species that has to survive harsh conditions." He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the stars hung in the darkness like diamonds. Somewhere out there, the Velkarons waited for the results of the study. They expected confirmation of their superiority. They expected to see written in the human genetic code the marks of an inferior species, one destined to serve and follow. What they would find instead was something far more complicated. "We need to verify this," Mi-sun said. "Different samples, different machines, different methodologies. If this is real, we need to be absolutely certain before anyone learns about it." The next 72 hours were intense. They ran the tests using every possible variation. They used different genetic sequencers, machines built by different manufacturers using different technologies. They pulled new samples from the storage banks, verifying that the original samples had not been damaged or contaminated. They ran their analysis through multiple computer systems to make sure there were no errors in calculation. Every single test returned the same result. Humans had triple the aggression sequences that Velkarons possessed. On the morning of the third day, as the sun began to rise over the planet below them, Dr. Kyung-soo made a critical decision. He called for a full team meeting. All 15 members of the research group gathered in the laboratory conference room. Most of them had no idea what the emergency meeting was about. Some looked confused. Others looked worried. Ji-ho, who already knew about the discovery, sat quietly in the back corner. "We have found something unusual in the genetic data," Kyung-soo began. He did not use complicated scientific language. He used simple, clear words that anyone could understand. "The results are consistent and reproducible. We have verified them multiple times using different methods." He displayed the genetic comparison on the conference room screen. The graphs and charts showed the aggression marker comparison clearly. There was no way to misunderstand what they were looking at. The room fell silent. Someone gasped. Another person stood up and moved closer to the screen, as if being nearer to the data would help them understand it better. "How is this possible?" asked Dr. Park, one of the senior geneticists. "Humans are not a warrior species. We are young. We have not had millions of years to develop biological traits for combat." "That is exactly why," Mi-sun said, speaking up from her seat. "Humans evolved on Earth, a planet full of predators and dangers. Surviving on Earth required the ability to be ferociously aggressive, but also the ability to cooperate with other humans, to form groups, to care for each other. Humans had to carry both traits or they would have gone extinct. Velkarons evolved on a more stable world," Kyung-soo continued. "They became the dominant species early and faced less need for the kind of aggressive survival response that humans needed. Instead, their genetics selected for discipline, for logic, for the ability to control and refine aggression through culture and training. The implications began to settle over the group like a heavy blanket. One by one, they started to understand what this discovery really meant. It meant that Velkaron superiority was not written in their genes. It meant that everything the Velkarons believed about themselves was not biological destiny, but cultural choice. It meant that humans were dangerous in a way nobody had realized. Then the news leaked. Nobody ever found out exactly how it happened, but later investigation traced it back to intern Park Min, a young researcher who had been quietly processing samples in the lower laboratory. Park Min had seen partial data on a shared computer screen. His mind was quick enough to understand what it meant. His heart was foolish enough to share the information with his girlfriend, who worked at the Terran embassy on Kepler Station. Within 4 hours, the information had been transmitted across subspace communications to Earth. Within 8 hours, it had reached the Velkaran High Council. Within 12 hours, the entire galaxy knew. The response was immediate and chaotic. Humanity's military leaders demanded answers. Political leaders called emergency sessions. The media erupted with wild speculation and panic. Some humans celebrated, believing they had finally discovered their hidden power. Others feared what Velkarans might do if they felt threatened. On the Velkaran side, there was confusion and anger. How could this be? How could their greatest rival species carry genetic traits suggesting superior combat drive? Some voices called for immediate action, for taking advantage of the situation. Others demanded explanation from the scientists. And Dr. Kyung-soo, who had wanted only to understand the truth about human and Velkaran genetics, suddenly found himself at the center of the most dangerous discovery in galactic history. The truth, it seemed, could be far more dangerous than any weapon ever created. In the quiet hours before dawn, sitting alone in his laboratory, Kyung-soo wondered what would happen next. The data was out. The truth was known. And neither humanity nor the Velkarans would ever look at each other the same way again. Ambassador Lee Tae entered the conference room like a man walking into a thunderstorm. His face was dark with worry, his jaw clenched tight. Behind him came 2 security officers, and behind them, 3 other ambassadors from different human nations. The room was already crowded with Kyung-soo's research team, but everyone stopped what they were doing and turned to look at the newcomers. "We need to talk about this genetic discovery," Lee Tae said without any greeting or politeness. "The situation is becoming very difficult." Kyung-soo stood, gesturing for the ambassador to sit. "Ambassador, we have more analysis to share. The initial data is only part of the picture. If we can explain the full context—" "There is no time for context," Lee Tae interrupted. "The Velkaran government is making statements on every news network. They are calling the research fraudulent. They are suggesting that humans falsified the data to cause conflict. Some of their military leaders are demanding that the Velkaran High Council take defensive measures." The word defensive hung in the air like a threat. Everyone understood what it really meant. The Velkarans were considering military action. One of the other ambassadors, Ambassador Chang from the Korean Federation, spoke up. "We need to suppress this research, immediately. Tell the scientific community that there was an error in the data. Say that the samples were contaminated. We need to make this go away before it causes a galactic war." Kyung-soo felt something cold settle in his chest. "We cannot do that. The data is accurate. The research is sound. If we lie about this, we will only make things worse when the truth comes out later." "The truth does not matter right now," Lee Tae said, his voice heavy. "What matters is survival. If the Velkarans believe that humans are genetically superior warriors, they may attack preemptively. We cannot let that happen." But before the conversation could continue, something unexpected happened. A communication came through on the secure channel, a message from the Velkaran High Council requesting a direct meeting with Dr. Kyung-soo. Not with ambassadors, not with military leaders, with the scientist himself. 2 hours later, Kyung-soo found himself in a meeting room on the Velkaran section of Kepler Station. The room was vast and cold, decorated with patterns and colors that human eyes found uncomfortable to look at. Across from him sat 3 Velkarans in formal ceremonial dress. The one in the center, Ambassador Vorthen, had compound eyes that reflected the light like polished metal. "Doctor," Vorthen said in perfect human language, "we have questions about your research." Kyung-soo took a breath. He knew this moment could determine whether his work would be used to build peace or fuel conflict. "I will answer honestly," he said. "That is all I can do." For the next 2 hours, Kyung-soo explained the research in detail. He walked them through the data, showed them the aggression markers, the empathy markers, the cooperation genes. He explained how humans had evolved on a violent world and needed to carry both aggression and compassion to survive. What surprised him was how Vor then responded. The Velkaran ambassador did not become angry or defensive. Instead, something like understanding seemed to appear in his expression. "I see," Vorthen said finally. "So humans are not the warriors we feared, but you are something else entirely. You are beings who can contain contradictions. You can be violent and compassionate at the same time." "Yes," Kyung-soo said, relieved that Vorthen seemed to understand. "Exactly. This is actually not as alarming as our military leaders believe," Vor then continued. "In fact, it explains much about human history and human behavior. You are not superior because you lack aggression. You are interesting because you contain both extremes." But while Kyung-soo was having this productive conversation with Vor then, something far darker was happening on Earth. General Ryu Wan was a man who believed in human superiority. He had always believed it, even before the genetic research. Now that he had proof, he wanted to use it. In a secret military complex buried deep beneath the mountains of Korea, he began gathering loyal officers and politicians. His plan was bold and dangerous. He wanted to suppress the research completely. He wanted to tell the world that humans had discovered they were the superior warriors of the galaxy. And he wanted to use that false claim as justification for aggressive military expansion. Earth would become the dominant power, the Velkarans would be pushed back, humanity would rule. General Ryu Wan sent out carefully encrypted messages to key military commanders, political leaders, and wealthy business people who would benefit from conflict. He also sent a message to Dr. Kyung-soo, delivered through private channels. The message was simple. Stop publishing the complete research or people you care about will suffer. Kyung-soo received the message in his quarters late at night. He read it 3 times, not wanting to believe what it said. Then he read it again. There was no misunderstanding the threat. Dr. Mi-sun was in her laboratory when 2 security officers arrived. They did not identify themselves. They simply said they were taking her for questioning. Before she could resist or call for help, they were escorting her out of the station. When Kyung-soo discovered Mi-sun was missing, he contacted Lee Tae immediately. "Something is wrong. Mi-sun has disappeared. I received a threat not to publish the full research." Lee Tae's face became very pale. He closed the communication channel and started making calls to military intelligence. What they discovered over the next hours was shocking. General Ryu Wan had been building a secret network of military officers and politicians who wanted to suppress the research and use it for military expansion. But Lee Tae had authority and resources too. He began working with other ambassadors to expose Ryu Wan's conspiracy. Meanwhile, Kyung-soo made a decision. He was going to tell the truth no matter what happened. He was going to broadcast the complete research to the entire galaxy, giving everyone the real data and his real interpretation of what it meant. The question was whether he would be able to do it before something worse happened. Dr. Mi-sun woke up in a small room with white walls and no windows. Her head hurt. She had a vague memory of being taken from the laboratory, but the details were fuzzy. They had probably given her something to make her sleep, she realized. Some kind of drug. She sat up slowly, taking in her surroundings. The room was clean but empty. Just a bed, a small table, and a door with no handle on her side. She knew immediately that she was a prisoner, but she did not know why or where she was. That frightened her more than she wanted to admit. At the same time, far away in the laboratory, Dr. Kyung-soo was making a discovery. While searching through the expanded genetic data, looking for any additional insights, he found something that Meeson had been working on before she disappeared. It was a detailed analysis of the relationship between aggression genes and empathy genes in human DNA. What Meeson had found was remarkable. She had discovered that in humans, the aggression sequences and the empathy sequences were physically linked on the genetic code. They were not separate traits that had evolved independently. They were connected, as if evolution had deliberately paired them together. This meant that humans with high aggression potential also carried high empathy potential. They were designed by nature to care about others even as they carried the capacity for extreme violence. This connection did not exist in Velcaron genetics. Their aggression and empathy traits were separate, independent systems. A Velcaron could theoretically be extremely aggressive without being capable of deep empathy, but a human could not. Humans who were aggressive were also naturally pushed toward care for others. Kyung-soo printed out Meeson's analysis and read it carefully several times. With each reading, he understood more fully what it meant. Humans were not simply aggressive creatures. Humans were beings who had evolved a biological system that forced them to consider both the violence they could do and the compassion they could feel. In a sense, nature had created them as walking contradictions, creatures who had to constantly balance their own opposing natures. He realized this was exactly what Mi-sun would have wanted him to find. She had been working toward this conclusion when she disappeared. Now he needed to understand why it was important and how it changed everything about their research. Kyung-soo spent the next 48 hours diving deeper into the genetic pathways. He discovered that humans also carried exceptionally strong emotional regulation genes. These were the biological systems that allowed humans to feel intense emotions, but still maintain control of their actions. They could be angry but still think clearly. They could be afraid but still act with courage. They could be hurt but still show compassion to others. This was the missing piece. Humans were not simply triple aggressive. Humans were carefully balanced creatures whose biology forced them to contain multitudes. They were violent and peaceful, individual and communal, logical and emotional, all at the same time. Their genetics had not created a superior species of warriors. Their genetics had created a species uniquely capable of survival through extreme adaptability. When Kyung-soo realized the full scope of what this meant, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. This was not a story about human superiority or Velcaron inferiority. This was a story about two different kinds of beings, shaped by different evolutionary paths, creating different kinds of strength. He began working on a comprehensive research paper. He included all the data they had collected. He included the analysis of aggression markers, empathy markers, emotional regulation pathways, cooperation genes, and logical reasoning sequences. He included graphs and charts showing the relationships between all these traits. Most importantly, he included his interpretation. The paper argued that humans were not superior to Velcarons. Neither were Velcarons superior to humans. They were simply different. Velcarons had evolved to be warriors through culture and discipline and logical thinking. Humans had evolved to be adaptable through biological necessity, carrying both the capacity for violence and the capacity for love within their very genetic code. The paper proposed that this difference could be a source of strength for both species, not conflict. If humans and Velcarons worked together, they could combine human adaptability and empathy with Velcaron discipline and logic. They could create something stronger than either species could achieve alone. Kyung-soo worked through the night, refining the paper, making sure every statement was supported by the data. He wanted it to be clear and understandable, written in simple language that anyone could read, not just scientists. By dawn, the paper was complete. He saved it to multiple locations. He sent copies to every scientist on his team. He prepared it for publication in the most respected scientific journals in the galaxy. He made plans to present it to both human and Velcaron political leaders. But then he realized something was still missing. The paper contained all the scientific information, but it lacked something that only he could provide. He needed to add a personal statement, a message from himself directly to the people of both species. He sat down and began to record a video message. "My name is Dr. Kyung-soo," he said, speaking directly to the camera. "I am the lead researcher on the genetic comparison project between humans and Velcarons. I want to speak to you not as a scientist, but as a person who has come to understand something important about what we are." He paused, gathering his thoughts. For millions of years, humanity and Velcarons evolved on different worlds, facing different challenges. Those challenges shaped us biologically, and those biological differences are real. But biology is not destiny. What matters is not what we are born with, but what we choose to do with what we are. He explained in simple terms what the research had shown. He talked about aggression and empathy, about how humans carried both traits linked together in their genes. He talked about how Velcarons had chosen discipline and culture over biological predisposition. "Neither path is wrong," he said. "Neither species is superior. We are simply different, shaped by our different histories. And I believe that if we can accept these differences, if we can stop trying to prove superiority and start trying to understand each other, we can build something remarkable together." When the message was complete, Kyung-soo prepared everything for release. He had one more thing to do, though. He had to try to save Mi-sun. He contacted Ambassador Lee Tae and told him everything. The ambassador had resources and authority. If anyone could find and protect Mi-sun, it would be him. Lee Tae listened to everything Kyung-soo said, then made a decision. "We will find her," he said simply, "and then we will release your research to the entire galaxy. The truth deserves to be heard." Kyung-soo felt something like hope begin to grow in his chest. The truth was powerful. The truth could change things. But only if people had the courage to speak it. The Velcaron High Council met in their chamber on their home world, deep beneath the surface of their fortress city. There were 12 council members, each one representing a different region of Velcaron space. They were the most powerful political leaders of their entire species. For 3 days and 3 nights, they studied Dr. Kyung-soo's research paper without sleeping. They read every page, they analyzed every chart, they discussed every implication. The room was silent except for the soft sounds of papers being turned and fingers moving across data screens. When they finally finished, War Commander Tresh, who led the military forces of all Velcarons, was the first to speak. "This human scientist tells us that we are not superior warriors because we lack aggression," Tresh said, his voice deep and thoughtful. "That we became warriors through culture and discipline, not through genetics. This is not an insult. This is a compliment. It means we achieved our dominance through conscious choice, not accident of birth." The council members nodded, beginning to understand what Tresh meant. "But there is something else," said Council Member Vorthen, who had been the one to meet with Kyung-soo on Kepler Station. "The human species is something we have never encountered before. They are not superior or inferior. They are different in a way that is almost impossible to understand. They contain contradiction in their very biology. They are capable of extreme violence and extreme compassion simultaneously. They are the most unpredictable beings we have encountered." "This could be dangerous," said one of the other council members nervously. "Or it could be incredibly valuable," replied Tresh. "Imagine what we could accomplish if we could work with such beings. Humans could provide adaptability and creative thinking. We could provide discipline and logical planning. Together, we could understand aspects of the universe that neither species could understand alone." The council voted on a proposal to send a delegation to Kepler Station to speak directly with Dr. Kyung-soo and his team. The vote was unanimous. The delegation would consist of 5 members: War Commander Tresh, Ambassador Vorthen, 2 other military leaders, and 1 biological philosopher named Kelthas, who specialized in understanding how different species thought and behaved. 3 days later, they arrived at Kepler Station. Dr. Kyung-soo met them in the main conference room. He was nervous. He did not know what the Velkarans would say or do. But when Tresh entered the room, his demeanor was calm and respectful. This was not the meeting of conqueror and conquered. This was the meeting of 2 species trying to understand each other. Dr. Kyung-soo, Tresh began, your research suggests that humans terrify us. Not because you are genetically aggressive, but because you survived by being broken and brilliant simultaneously. You are contradiction made flesh. You created beautiful art while making weapons of war. You wrote poetry about love and war in the same breath. We became warriors because we had to. But you became warriors despite having the capacity for so much more. Kyung-soo felt tears begin to form in his eyes. He had not expected the Velkarans to understand so well. My species has dominated this region of space for 3,000 years, Tresh continued. But dominance through force is temporary. It lasts only as long as you are willing to keep fighting. I believe what we need is partnership. Not 1 species ruling another, but 2 species combining our strengths to build something neither of us could build alone. We would like to propose a formal alliance, Vorthen added. Not as master and servant, but as equals. Your people would contribute your adaptability and innovation. Our people would contribute our discipline and strategy. Together, we could face the challenges of the galaxy. It was the most hopeful moment Kyung-soo could remember. The Velkarans were not angry about the research. They were not planning conflict. They wanted to build peace and cooperation. But even as this meeting was happening, something darker was unfolding on Earth. General Ryu Wan's conspiracy was beginning to crack. Ambassador Lee Tae had been working quietly with military intelligence to identify everyone involved in the plot. Military officers who were sympathetic to Lee Tae's vision had helped him uncover the network. Slowly, carefully, Lee Tae was gathering evidence of everything Ryu Wan had done. More importantly, Lee Tae had discovered where Mi-sun was being held. She was in a military facility hidden in the mountains, guarded by soldiers loyal to Ryu Wan. But Ryu Wan had made a critical mistake. He had told too many people about the conspiracy. Some of those people had doubts. Some of them did not want to be part of a plot to suppress scientific truth. 3 military officers, all of whom had worked under Ryu Wan's command, came to Ambassador Lee Tae in secret. "We cannot do this," one of them said. "The general is asking us to betray everything we believe in. We want to help you." With the help of these officers, a rescue team was assembled. They moved with military precision and secrecy. In the middle of the night, they surrounded the facility where Mi-sun was being held. There was a brief moment of tension when some of Ryu Wan's most loyal soldiers tried to resist, but the rescue team was larger and better prepared. Within minutes, Mi-sun was freed. She emerged from the facility confused and frightened, not understanding what had happened. When she saw the rescue officers, she thought she was being taken to another location. It was not until she was back on Kepler Station and saw Dr. Kyung-soo that she finally understood she was safe. "They took me," she said, still shaking from the experience. "They wanted you to stop publishing the research." "I know," Kyung-soo said, holding her hand, "but it did not work. The research is going to be published. The truth is going to be heard." At that exact moment, Lee Tae was presenting evidence of Ryu Wan's conspiracy to Earth's political leadership. The evidence was overwhelming. Messages, financial records, witness testimony from the military officers who had turned against Ryu Wan. There was no way to deny what had happened. General Ryu Wan was arrested before he could flee. His conspiracy fell apart as quickly as it had come together. The military officers loyal to him either abandoned him or were taken into custody for questioning. But the most important thing was that the truth could now be told without fear. Dr. Kyung-soo's research could be published. The message about human and Velcaron genetics could be shared with the entire galaxy. And in the main communications center of Kepler Station, everything was being prepared for a broadcast that would change galactic history forever.